Hello and welcome to Kingston Now. I'm Jimmy Buff. This week we have some live local music with Burnell Pines. We'll talk to Sara Eckel, a local author getting national attention for her new book, It's Not You, 27 Wrong Reasons You're Single. And we start with Peter Aaron, music editor for Chronogram and author of a new book. If you like the Ramones, here are over 200 bands, CDs, films, and other oddities that you will love. That's a title for a book.
It's kind of busy, isn't it?
It is,
yeah.
But it says it all, right?
It does. It's as far as self-explanatory titles go, I think it's probably up there at the top.
Now, is there a psychographic for punk rock and do the Ramones actually fit into punk rock? Because they really did cross over mainstream.
Sure. Well, I mean, the Ramones are seen by most people as being the first true punk rock band
in America.
I mean, yeah, and actually, well, anywhere. Mm-hmm. And certainly there was proto-punk bands that were had a lot of the main signature elements of punk and of what the Ramones did that came a little bit before them. But they were really the first group that kind of, example of which all of that coalesced and fit a certain moment of time and launched the punk explosion. I mean, they influenced the Sex Pistols and the Clash and all the English bands.
And everyone who couldn't play an instrument and plugged in their garage.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Just kind of bringing it back to rock and roll, back to what it was kind of originally meant to be, which is a fun, populist music that spoke really directly to kids. We got setting the scene somewhat to sort of put across the context of what was going on with the Ramones when they started. They had grown up themselves with fun, energetic, early rock and roll from the 1950s that they heard when they were really young, and then they were kind of right high school age when the British invasion hit. And rock and roll, after those eras, had kind of taken a turn where it was more serious and was just sort of trying to be more adult. And, you know, if you grew up loving rock and roll and loving Little Richard and Stone's Satisfaction and the early Who, Summer Breeze, Makes Me Feel Fine, Blowing Through the Candies of My Mind, it's not really going to cut it, you know. So they kind of, stripped it back down, and stripped it down in an extreme way. Actually, you could even say arguably stripped rock and roll down to something more minimal and energetic than even the syncopated blues-based music of the early rock and rollers.
So is there a mold for someone who likes the Ramones that enables you to say, well, if you like that, you'll like this?
Well, the thing that's, I mean, certainly a big part of the book are the artists that influenced the Ramones, and also there's their contemporaries and artists that were influenced by the Ramones. So using that logic, like, hey, all these things are things that you should like also. But I've also got a chapter in there about non-musical subjects, cartoons, weird TV shows that were on when they were kids, like the Munsters, the Honeymooners, things like that, comic books, weird movies, cult movies, these are things that absorbed and shaped them as people, and that comes out in the music in some ways, in a lot of ways. They would not have been the band they were without those things, Maybe not obvious to a lot of people, but.
And now you're a rock and roller yourself. You grew up out in the Midwest, and you started playing music when you were a teenager, like many kids did, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Actually, I moved to Cincinnati, Ohio when I was 16. My childhood before that time was spent in northern New Jersey, Morris County. I didn't really, I liked rock and roll and music, but I didn't really connect with it until punk in the 70s. That felt like, the stuff I was hearing on the radio, Stones and the Beatles and the Who, I kind of liked it, but it felt kind of still like big kids' music. And we just couldn't relate to it as much. Later on, I got the perspective, and I was able to relate to it in the way that I can relate to any music I like. But punk really connected with me, and I was an outsider, and that was a big part of the reason. I didn't feel like I fit in. I was in one of the first hardcore bands in New Jersey. I was sort of the age bracket where I was a little bit too young to take part in the beginnings of the punk wave, but started playing it, and then hardcore was a harder, faster version of that for you know, kids that were a little bit young for the first wave of punk. Then when I was 16, I moved to Ohio after a couple years of studying journalism at Boston University, 83 to 85. I ended up back in Cincinnati. I got involved in the club scene as a promoter. I booked about 5 or 6 different small clubs. I booked Nirvana on their first couple of tours, Flaming Lips, White Zombie, the Melvins, whoever. You know, I road managed Afghan Wigs on their first tour. They were local guys that were friends of mine. But that's what was going on. But, you know, Nirvana, those first couple of tours, like 20, 30 people, nobody knew who they were. Most of these bands slept on my floor in a little van. Yeah. So then I kind of started playing music again after taking some time off to concentrate on promoting. And I started a band called the Chrome Cranks with guitarist William Weber, who moves back to Cincinnati, lives back there now. But we moved to New York in 1992, found a couple other guys who started playing with. Bass player Jerry Teal had been in a group called the Honeymoon Killers. We had a couple different drummers, and we found the drummer that was best for us was Bob Burt, who was in Sonic Youth early on. He was in a group called Pussy Galore later on. Now he's playing with Lydia Lunch. And we did that for a few years, and you know, it kind of beat us up, and we broke up. And then after about 13 years, we started playing again. I mean, new record. And
yeah, last year you put out a new record, which got really terrific reviews.
Yeah, people still like it. It's crazy.
You're a music editor for Chronogram on top of that, so you're writing great music reviews about terrific local music, and you're actually doing a reading for this book this Friday night at Inquiring Minds in New Paltz, and I believe that reading is starts at 7 o'clock on Friday night?
7 o'clock, yeah.
Well, terrific. We enjoy your work with the Chronogram. This looks like a terrific new book. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks so much, Jimmy.
Thank you. You're watching Kingston Now. Next, it's author Sara Eckel to talk about her new book, It's Not You, 27 Wrong Reasons You're Single. Welcome back to Kingston Now. Sara Eckel has been a nationally syndicated newspaper columnist, and she's just published her first book, It's Not You, 27 Wrong Reasons You're Single. Welcome to the show, Sara.
Thanks for having me, Jimmy.
You're a recent resident of the Hudson Valley. How'd you end up here?
Well, I lived in Brooklyn. My husband and I lived in Brooklyn for a long time, and I used to come up to Sky Lake Lodge in Rosendale for meditation weekends, and every time I took the bus up here, I loved it so much, and I always told everybody I was going to move up here. I work from home, then my husband got a job working from home, so we could move anywhere, so we moved here.
And how has it been so far?
It's been great. We love it. Yeah,
Great,
we love
good.
Uptown Kingston and Ulster County in general. It's just everything about it, yeah.
Well, a couple weekends ago, you had a piece in the New York Times about being a single woman for a very long time into your late 30s. Is that correct?
Yes. I met my husband when I was 39.
And it went viral amongst a certain demographic, as you might expect, over Facebook and Twitter and things like that. It's the book is the experience that you went through yourself, right?
Yes, exactly. It's my experience of being a single woman who did not choose to be single. And while I sometimes tried to be very upbeat about it and say, oh, I love being single, and often did, I did want to find somebody, and it was not my choice to remain single to age 39. And during that time, I asked myself a lot of questions about why wasn't this happening, and specifically, what was wrong with me. And I found that when I talked to other women who were in a similar situation, that was the kind of the question that resonated with so many of us, what's wrong with me? And I thought that was something to explore. And once I met my husband, I realized that I was just fine, that I was just as flawed and weird as anybody else, but he still loved me. So.
And it just took you a little bit longer to find that one, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't only you and the women in a similar situation who felt that there's this sort of outside influence that why aren't you married yet, right? Isn't there? So, I mean, hence the title, 27 Wrong Reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of the outside influence, I mean, there's a cultural influence of, there's always a million articles online, 27 reasons why you're single, or, well, that's one, all these different things, why you're not married yet, implying that women are too intimidating, or maybe you're too desperate seeming. But the idea is always that there's some kind of issue that you have that you need to fix in order to make this happen. And so there's the cultural thing, and then there's also friends and family who really mean the best, but they also are puzzled because they love you and they want to see you happy. And so sometimes they will also get into that problem of like, well, maybe you're just a little too picky. That seemed to be the thing that friends and family said to women the most.
Your time as a single woman, the solitude, I was single for a long time between my first very brief marriage and my current marriage, and I found such great value in that solitude, even though there were times when I pined, I wanted a partner, but there was also a great amount of growth, if you will, and things that happened during that time that I didn't have to worry about once I finally met the person.
Yeah, I think that it's really undervalued, that time, and because, I mean, I didn't choose to have lots of weekends to myself and a lot of this solitude, especially because I worked at home. But at a certain point I realized, well, this is kind of a great opportunity to just be quiet and to kind of start to learn to really relax into what my life is, regardless of what I want it to be, and let go of that a little bit. And I find that's very helpful just now that I'm in a relationship. Things happen that you're not always happy about, and it just, I find I can just relax into whatever's happening. And not come up with a lot of ideas of how Mark should be, how I should be, whatever. It makes it much simpler, even though it didn't have anything to do with how I met him. That was just kind of a random fluke, but it has made, I think it's made me better at being in a relationship.
Is "you're too picky" the #1 wrong reason? Is there a hierarchy to the reasons? That
was the one that, when I asked women, like what friends and family said, that was the one that they said they heard the most. So I think that maybe "you're too intimidating." I think that tends, I mean, friends and family have said that to women too, but I think that a lot of times that comes from like kind of old-fashioned dating guides and things like that. So there's a lot of different places that these ideas come to. But one thing I realized was that I was buying into so much of it, that maybe they came from outside of me, but I wouldn't, if I wasn't buying into them, they wouldn't have bothered me. There was something where I was buying into them and I was really trying to figure it all out. But then it becomes such a contradiction because, well, how can I be both too desperate and too picky? Seems like you have to be one or the other. So,
and being accused of being too picky seems odd to me, because you want to find a person who you're mostly, it's not like you're buying a car and the color's not exactly right. This is a person you're going to spend a whole lot of time with, maybe, make that commitment of marriage to.
And it's unfair to the other person to settle for somebody. It's just not, it's not kind to say, well, I was kind of hoping I could do a little better, but, I'm 33 and I better just,
and you're it.
He'll do,
right.
yeah. It seems like that then he misses the opportunity to find that person who thinks he's just wonderful and doesn't see it as just this sort of boring, sensible thing to be doing, but just as a wonderful opportunity. Were
you surprised? I mean, I know that the book is just out, and there are 2 columns in the New York Times that were sort of the precursor to this. You got a lot of feedback from women. Were you surprised at how many identified with it?
Yeah, I was really surprised by how many identified with it, and I was also surprised by the fact that it was so, I mean, I heard from someone in Dubai. I heard from a woman in China who said all of her friends were posting it. I was amazed by that. I was also amazed by the fact that I heard from, 70-year-old men, and I heard from like 19-year-old women that, college women and even I think someone from high school, even they were already troubled by this. So that was really interesting to me that I heard from a 23-year-old Harvard medical school student, and all her friends were getting married, and she was asking this question, and you just think, wow, if you're having this problem, wow.
But I have to say, it's pretty wonderful to find out that others are feeling the same thing, because there's so much relief in, oh, it's not me.
Yeah.
It's kind of normal, and other people go through it too. So congratulations on helping people feel that.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. On the book too.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being
here, Sarah.
Thanks.
It was super fun. Thank you.
This is Kingston Now. Next, we're going to have some live music in the studio with Burnell Pines. Wait till you see his beard. watching Kingston Now. We're joined by Burnell Pines, a new project for Jeremy Bernstein. Hi, Jeremy. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing today?
I'm all right. Now, you have had the band Stony Clove Lane for a number of years. What is Burnell Pines in relation to that?
I guess one could say it'd be my solo project. Stony Clove Lane, at this point, we play about once a year, get together and kind of fun with the boys. And Burnell Pines is my, here I go.
So why not Jeremy Bernstein? Where does Burnell Pines come from? Is that a character? Is that a...
A little. I mean, Burnell comes from Bernstein. I have a close friend who's been calling me that for years. And when I left Stony Clove Lane to pursue a solo career, I went out under my own name for about a year, and something about it just doesn't feel right. I feel that it is more of a mystique, more of a character, and it just feels good.
There are other musicians on the record you've got coming out in the spring.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Tell me about this great local community of musicians we've got in the Catskill Mountains.
Yeah, man, are we lucky. There's a lot of amazing talent here. I've got, luckily I was able to pull from, a whole myriad of people. I've got Zach Alford on the drums, Ben Porowski on the drums, Robert Chicken Burke on the drums, and Joe Magistra on the drums, kind of four of my favorite drummers on the planet. And
all people who play at a national level.
Yeah. That's right, that's correct. I've got bass players that range from Byron Isaacs of Levon's band to Sarah Lee. Let's see, guitar players Adam Widoff, myself. Yeah, just a bunch of great guests.
Yeah, and everyone so accomplished and so tightly knit into this music community that we have in the area, which is great stuff. And the sound is really terrific and fleshed out. Recorded in your home studio?
No, I recorded this on Sun Mountain in Boyceville with a man named David Barron.
Who's getting a lot of attention too these days for producing a lot of good people.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, great. I love the music you're making as Burnell Pines. Would you play us a song?
I'd love to. The song's called Eastbound.
That's it for this week's show. Thanks to Peter Aaron. For more about his reading this Friday at Inquiring Minds in New Paltz and his new Ramones book, go to peteraaron.org. For more about Sara Eckel and her book, It's Not You, 27 Wrong Reasons You're Single, go to saraeckel.com. And to hear more from Burnell Pines, go to burnellpines.com. Remember, all of our previous shows are available on our YouTube channel. You can find that link on our Facebook page. For Kingston Now, I'm Jimmy Buff. We'll see you next time.